We've all had it. That fleeting weird sensation that you've been here before, said this before, lived this exact moment before. Most of the time, it's a harmless brain glitch, a flicker in our perception that we forget seconds later. But what happens when it doesn't fade? What happens when that feeling of already seen becomes a warning? When it feels less like a memory and more like a rehearsal for something terrible? These are stories from people who experienced that glitch and found themselves staring into an abyss where reality, memory, and time come apart. But before starting, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you are from and at what time you are watching, just to make sure that the YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. My name is Frank, and for 22 years, I've driven trucks. It's not a glamorous life, but it's an honest one. I've seen every mile of asphalt this country has to offer, from the sun-baked highways of the Southwest to the icy passes of the Rockies. I'm a practical man. I believe in what I can see, what I can touch, and what I can fix with a wrench. I believe in diesel engines, tire pressure, and the hours of service logbook that dictates my life. Or at least, I used to. This happened on a long haul through Nevada, on a stretch of Route 91 so empty you could fall asleep for 10 minutes and not drift out of your lane. It was about 3 in the morning, the kind of deep, silent dark that swallows sound and plays tricks on your eyes. The only thing keeping me awake was the lukewarm, bitter coffee in my thermos and an old country station I'd found on the satellite radio, a signal bouncing from space to the lonely heart of my cab. A song came on, one of those gravelly voiced ballads about heartbreak and whiskey, the kind of song that sounds like it was recorded in a room full of cigarette smoke and regret. I remember the singer's voice, cracked and world-weary. As the song played, I passed a landmark, a single, bullet-riddled sign for a town called Silver Creek. Population, well, the number was rusted away. Just an old ghost sign on the side of the road, a forgotten promise. A moment later, I saw a lone coyote on a ridge to my right, a perfect, still silhouette against the faint glow of a sliver of moon. It stood there, head tilted, watching my rig thunder past. Then the song ended, fading into a hiss of static before the next one started. Just another 3 minutes of my life burned on the road. Nothing more. Then, the static cleared, and a guitar intro started. The same one, the same gravelly voiced singer. I grunted, tapping the radio display. Satellite radio could be glitchy out here in the middle of nowhere, the signal bouncing off a stray bit of cosmic dust for all I knew. Probably just the buffer repeating. I didn't think much of it until I saw something up ahead. A flicker of white in my headlights. It was the sign for Silver Creek. My blood went cold. Not a slow chill, a sudden icy plunge like being dropped into a frozen lake. I stared at it as I passed. Same rust stains, same bullet holes. My eyes darted to the ridge on my right, and there it was, the coyote, standing in the exact same spot, head tilted in the exact same way. It was impossible. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't stopped. The road only went one way, a straight black line through nothing. The song ended. Static. Then the opening chords of the next song, which was the same song. Again, that's when the sickness started in my stomach, a sour knot of dread. This wasn't a radio glitch. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady rhythm of the engine. I looked at my dash cam, thinking maybe I'd had a microsleep, that I'd somehow looped around, but the timestamp was ticking forward normally. 3:06 a.m., 3:07 a.m. The numbers marched on oblivious. The song played on. I passed the Silver Creek sign. I saw the coyote on the ridge. Everything was identical. It was like watching a movie clip on repeat, but I was in it. I could feel the vibration of the engine through the soles of my boots, smell the stale coffee on my breath. This was real. It felt like I was starting over from a checkpoint in a video game, but without the memory of having failed the first time won. After the third time, panic took the wheel. Real, screaming panic. I thought, I have to break it. I have to do something different. This time, when the song started, I floored it. My Kenworth roared, the engine screaming in protest as I pushed it past 100. The road was a blur of white lines, but the song seemed to stretch. The 3 and half-minute ballad lasted for the entire time it took me to cover the distance at high speed. As the final chord faded, I shot past the sign. I saw the coyote. The loop was tied to the event, not the time. Next loop, I tried the opposite. I slowed the rig to a crawl, barely 20 miles an hour. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I turned the radio off. Complete silence. But then I heard it. Faintly, as if it was being carried on the wind outside my cab. The same damn song was playing. I saw the sign. I saw the coyote. I was trapped. A rat in a maze that was only a few miles long. On the next loop, I noticed something new. Something that made the hair on my arms stand up. Just as I passed the coyote, I saw a flicker in my rearview mirror. Headlights. Far behind me, but they were there. Then they were gone. A ghost. I started talking to myself, a frantic, desperate monologue. Okay, Frank. Okay. You're overtired. It's a hallucination. Just keep driving. Drive through it. But every time the song started again, a piece of my sanity chipped away. I tried my CB radio, twisting the dial, calling out for anyone. All I got back was static, and underneath it, I could swear I heard that same gravelly voice, singing its song of sorrow. Loop 7, or maybe it was 8. I lost count. I was crying now. Big, heaving sobs of a grown man who had lost his map. I tried to pull over, to just stop the truck and wait for the sun, but my hands wouldn't obey. It felt like I was just a passenger. I checked my mirror again as I passed the coyote. The headlights were there. Closer this time, brighter, and they were gaining on me. Fast. Impossibly fast. And then, on what I knew with a certainty that came from a place deeper than thought, was the final loop. I understood. The dread that had been building wasn't just fear of the repetition. It was anticipation. The loop wasn't a glitch. It was a rehearsal. A countdown. I wasn't being warned from something. I was being prepared for it. The song started. The gravelly voice felt like a funeral dirge. I passed the sign for Silver Creek. I looked at the ridge, but the coyote was gone. My eyes shot to the mirror. The headlights weren't 2 points of light anymore. They were a blinding, all-consuming sun filling my entire cab. I didn't even have time to scream before the world exploded into a symphony of tearing metal and the final, crashing chord of the song. I don't know how many times I've driven this road since then. The loop never ends. The song always plays. And the lights are always coming for me. I just have to get through this stretch one more time. Maybe this time, I'll make it. My name is Kevin. I'm an architect now. I design buildings, solid things with clear rules and predictable physics. I deal in load-bearing walls, stress tolerances, and the immutable laws of gravity. I think, deep down, I chose this profession because of what happened when I was 9 years old. I needed to believe that spaces were fixed, that a room is just a room, and that when you open a door, the same place is always waiting for you on the other side. I know better now. When I was 9, I broke one of my mom's favorite ceramic vases. It was a hideous thing, a floral monstrosity she'd gotten as a wedding gift, but she loved it. It was an accident, a stray tennis ball in the living room, but the result was the same. I was sent to my room, my ears burning with shame and my dad's disappointed voice. I remember stomping up the stairs, filled with the righteous indignation only a child can muster. I threw open my bedroom door, ready to slam it shut for dramatic effect. But the slam never came. I froze in the doorway. A wave of cold, musty air washed over me, an alien atmosphere in my own home. This wasn't my room, P2. The layout was the same. The window on the left, the closet on the right. But everything in it was wrong. My wooden bed frame with the race car headboard was gone, replaced by a simple, black metal frame with a thin, lumpy mattress. My posters of dinosaurs and astronauts were gone, the walls a bare, sickly yellow, stained with watermarks near the ceiling. The air smelled of stale cigarette smoke, dust, and something else, something like old, forgotten clothes. It wasn't the clean laundry and plastic smell of my toys. It was my room, but hollowed out, occupied by a ghost version of itself. And it wasn't empty. Standing by the window, his back to me, was a man. He was tall and unnaturally thin, wearing a long, dark coat even though it was a bright spring afternoon. The sunlight streaming through the window was so bright it turned him into a stark, black silhouette, obscuring any features. He didn't move. He didn't turn. But I felt his presence like a physical weight, a pressure in the air that told me I was trespassing in a place I didn't belong. It was a feeling of profound wrongness. Terror, pure and absolute, seized me. My throat closed up. I couldn't scream. All I could manage was a choked, pathetic squeak.
Sorry.
I slammed the door and bolted. I flew down the stairs, screaming for my parents. My dad, annoyed at first, followed me back up. He pushed the door open, ready to scold me, but he just saw my room. My bed, my posters, my toys scattered on the floor. It was perfectly normal. They told me I had an overactive imagination, that I'd probably just had a bad dream. For a while, I was scared to go into my room alone. I'd peek around the door first, making sure it was my room. But over time, I came to believe them. The memory faded, becoming just another weird story from childhood, filed away with nightmares and imaginary friends. Years passed. I turned 17. My life was filled with the usual teenage concerns: grades, getting my driver's license, and the girl who had just moved in next door. Her name was Sarah. One afternoon, I was in my room, supposed to be doing homework, but instead I was staring out my window into her backyard. She was out there, reading in a lawn chair. I was just watching, lost in that dumb, angsty way a teenage boy can be. I was standing right by the window, the afternoon sun at my back, making my reflection in the glass a dark shape against the bright outdoors. The house was quiet. My parents were out. I was completely lost in thought when I heard it. A faint creak from the hallway. My bedroom door, which I'd left slightly ajar, began to push slowly inward. My heart jumped. I thought it was my mom home early. I started to turn, a guilty flush rising on my neck for being caught spying on the neighbor. But it wasn't my mom. From the widening gap of the doorway, a small voice, a child's voice, trembled in the quiet room.
Shh, sorry.
The door slammed shut. I heard the frantic, panicked pounding of small feet on the staircase, then a muffled scream from downstairs. A cold wave washed over me, but it wasn't fear. It was something far, far worse. It was recognition. A perfect, horrifying, impossible recognition. I stood frozen, my own reflection a dark silhouette against the window, and I understood. I was the man in the room. I ran downstairs, my legs shaking, just as I had when I was 9. The house was empty. There was no child. There was no one. I grabbed my phone and called my parents, my voice cracking. I asked them, "Do you remember that day? The day I broke the vase and said there was a man in my room." There was a confused silence on the other end of the line. My mom's voice was hesitant. "Kevin, what are you talking about? You've never broken a vase in your life. I've never been able to enter that room again." My parents eventually sold the house, but I'm still haunted by it. Was it my future self I saw? Or was I just a ghost in someone else's story? A terrifying silhouette in a little boy's bedroom. Every time I design a building, I add an extra bolt to the door, an extra latch on the window. I build walls to keep things out. But sometimes when I look in the mirror, I half expect to see a stranger staring back. Sometimes I think I do. My older brother, Mark, was my hero. He was 5 years older, cooler, funnier, and smarter than I could ever hope to be. He taught me how to throw a baseball, how to talk to girls, and how to get away with sneaking out of the house. We were close. In that way you can only be with a sibling you've shared a whole life with. And I'm the one who got him killed. It started with a dream. That's what people call it anyway. Déjà vu. The feeling you've dreamed something before. For me, it was more like a memory of the future, delivered while I slept. The first one was harmless. I had this incredibly vivid, incredibly mundane dream about a Sunday dinner at our parents' house. I dreamed of the specific floral pattern on my mom's new tablecloth. I dreamed of the way the late afternoon sun hit the water glasses, making little rainbows on the wall. And I dreamed of a very specific, very stupid conversation. In the dream, my mom served her new potato soup recipe. She asked how it was. I looked at Mark, and he looked at me, and we both said, at the exact same time, "It's good. Could use a little more salt though." I woke up and forgot about it. 2 weeks later, I was at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. My mom brought out a new tablecloth. It was the one from my dream. I felt a little jolt, a flicker of familiarity. Then she brought out the soup, and the sun hit the water glasses, and the little rainbows danced on the wall. The feeling hit me like a physical blow. It was like the world snapped into focus, and I was suddenly reading from a script. My mom asked, "So, how's the soup?" I looked at Mark. I knew, with absolute certainty, what he was about to say. I opened my mouth and spoke with him, in perfect unison. "It's good. Could use a little more salt, though." Mark's eyes went wide for a second before he burst out laughing.
Jenks, you owe me a soda!
But I couldn't laugh. I was covered in goosebumps. It wasn't a coincidence. I had lived this moment before in my head. It became a kind of party trick. I'd have these little flashes, these dream memories of pointless conversations or events. It was weird but fun. A cool story to tell. I never thought it could be anything else. Then I had the nightmare. It wasn't a story like the other dreams. It was just flashes, fragments of horror. The cracked dashboard of Mark's beat-up Honda, the spiderweb of shattered glass on the passenger side window, the smell of gasoline and burnt rubber, the sound of screeching tires in a terrible, final crunch of metal. I saw a street sign the intersection of Oak and 7th, and I heard Mark's voice. It was weak, just a gasp, but I heard it clear as day. He said, "Tell them I'm sorry." I woke up screaming, drenched in a cold sweat. This was different. This wasn't a memory. This was a warning. The next day, my phone rang. It was Mark, buzzing with excitement. He'd scored tickets to see his favorite band. They were playing across town that night. My blood turned to ice when he said, "I'll just take the shortcut down 7th, should get me past the worst of the traffic." The rest of the day was a blur of rising panic. I begged him not to go. I told him I was sick, that I needed him to come over. I made up a story about our mom needing help with something heavy. He just laughed. "Leo, relax, man. It's a concert. I'll be fine. Stop being so weird." I tried to tell him about the dream, but the words felt insane coming out of my mouth. He just rolled his eyes. "Another one of your predictions. Dude, give it a rest." I thought about slashing his tires. I actually went out to his car with a knife, but I couldn't do it. I felt helpless, watching a future I couldn't stop. As the time for him to leave got closer, a desperate, terrible idea formed in my head. It was my last chance. I called 911. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely dial. I reported a drunk driver, giving them Mark's license plate and a description of his Honda. I told them he was heading down 7th Street. My thinking was, if they pulled him over, if they just delayed him, he wouldn't be at that intersection at the wrong time. I heard the sirens in the distance a few minutes later and felt a wave of sick relief. I had done it. I had changed the future. An hour later, 2 police officers were at my parents' front door. There had been an accident at Oak and 7th. A suspected drunk driver had run a red light and T-boned a police cruiser that was in the middle of a traffic stop. The officer in the cruiser was killed instantly. The driver of the other car, the one who had been pulled over, was critically injured. His name was Mark. The officer looked at me, my parents sobbing behind me, and he put a heavy hand on my shoulder. His voice was full of pity. "Your brother, he was alive when the paramedics got there." He held on for a few minutes. He made them promise to pass on a message. My whole body went numb. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted on its axis. The officer said, his last words, he said to tell his family he was sorry. I didn't prevent the future. I just changed the context. He wasn't apologizing for the crash. He was apologizing for getting a cop killed. An officer who was only there because I had called him. My warning wasn't a chance to save him. It was just a preview of the hell I would create. I haven't had a dream I can remember since that night. I think my brain knows I can't be trusted with the future. For about 2 years, I worked the night shift at a place called Meadowlark Gardens. It's a high-end memory care facility, the kind of place where families with money can feel a little less guilty about warehousing their elderly relatives. It was mostly quiet, just the hum of the air conditioners, the soft beeping of monitors, and the occasional soft, confused cry from a darkened room. My job was to make sure everyone was safe, comfortable, and didn't wander off. Most of the residents were lost in the fog of their own minds, their pasts a jumbled mess. Except for Miss Adelaide. Her chart was thin. It said she was 87, a former librarian, and suffered from a rare condition the doctors called chronic déjà vu, likely caused by some degradation in her temporal lobe. 6 to the facility. She was just another patient with a quirky diagnosis. To me, she was the most terrifying person I've ever met. On my first night, I went to introduce myself. Before I could say a word, she looked up from her knitting and gave me a soft, placid smile. "Oh, you're the new one. The last boy, David, he won't be back. His car broke down on the freeway. A blue Toyota." I gave her a polite, professional smile back and went about my duties. Later, out of curiosity, I asked another nurse about David. She told me he'd quit that morning. He'd called in frantic because his blue Toyota had died on the I-5 and he was taking it as a sign to move back home. I felt a prickle of unease. Adelaide's recollections were a nightly occurrence. She never phrased them as predictions, always as memories. I remember this version of tonight. She'd say, her voice like dry leaves, "The kitchen will run out of chamomile tea around 2 a.m. And it would. "That nice young man in 3C is going to have a fall. Don't worry, he'll just be bruised." And he did, and he was. The staff just wrote it off as the ramblings of a confused old woman who occasionally got lucky. But I was with her every night. It wasn't luck. It felt like she was watching a rerun of a show she'd seen 1,000 times. I grew fond of her, but the fondness was tangled with a deep, creeping dread. The line between her mind and the world felt permeable. The real terror began when her memories started to include me. I was thinking about quitting. I'd been saving up to go back to art school, and I was just about there. I hadn't told a soul. It was just a plan in my own head. One night, I was sitting with Adelaide while she watched an old black and white movie. She turned to me during a commercial, her eyes strangely lucid. "I remember you telling me you were a wonderful painter," she said softly. "It's a shame you were thinking of leaving us, but I'm glad you decided to stay." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It was a profound violation. My own private thoughts, my own plans, reflected back at me as a memory of a conversation that had never happened. I started to dread my shifts. I felt exposed, like my skull was made of glass. I found one of her old journals once, tucked under her mattress. It was filled with the same entry, written over and over. "Today is Tuesday, the sun is out. The nurse will bring me my pills at 9. He is a kind boy." But each entry had tiny variations, as if she were trying to find a different path through the same day. In one, the nurse was a nice boy. In another, he spilled the water. It was like she was documenting every possible timeline. The breaking point, the thing that made me leave and never look back, was the hum. Since I was a child, I've had a recurring nightmare. In it, I'm in a long, dark hallway and there's a sound. A simple, off-key humming melody. It's not a real song. It's just a sound my own subconscious cooked up to terrify me. It's the sound of pure dread. One night around 4 a.m., the facility was dead quiet. I was doing my final rounds. I looked into Adelaide's room and saw she was sitting bolt upright in her bed, staring at the far wall. I stepped inside, about to ask if she needed anything. She slowly turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, looking right through me. And then she began to hum. It was the melody from my nightmare. Note for perfect, horrifying note. I didn't even clock out. I walked out the front door, got in my car, and drove until the sun came up. I never went back. I still think about her. The doctors said she was stuck in a loop of her own memories. But what if they were wrong? What if she was an antenna, and her mind was just a receiver, picking up the past, the future, and the nightmares of everyone around her? Sometimes, when I'm just about to fall asleep, I can still hear it. That quiet, off-key hum. And I wonder if she wasn't stuck in a loop of her life, but a loop of all of ours. For about 2 years, I worked the night shift at a place called Meadowlark Gardens. It's a high-end memory care facility, the kind of place where families with money can feel a little less guilty about warehousing their elderly relatives. It was mostly quiet, just the hum of the air conditioners, the soft beeping of monitors, and the occasional soft, confused cry from a darkened room. My job was to make sure everyone was safe, comfortable, and didn't wander off. Most of the residents were lost in the fog of their own minds, their pasts a jumbled mess. Except for Miss Adelaide. Her chart was thin. It said she was 87, a former librarian, and suffered from a rare condition the doctors called chronic déjà vu, likely caused by some degradation in her temporal lobe. 6 to the facility. She was just another patient with a quirky diagnosis. To me, she was the most terrifying person I've ever met. On my first night, I went to introduce myself. Before I could say a word, she looked up from her knitting and gave me a soft, placid smile. "Oh, you're the new one. The last boy, David, he won't be back. His car broke down on the freeway. A blue Toyota." I gave her a polite, professional smile back and went about my duties. Later, out of curiosity, I asked another nurse about David. She told me he'd quit that morning. He'd called in frantic because his blue Toyota had died on the I-5 and he was taking it as a sign to move back home. I felt a prickle of unease. Adelaide's recollections were a nightly occurrence. She never phrased them as predictions, always as memories. I remember this version of tonight. She'd say, her voice like dry leaves, "The kitchen will run out of chamomile tea around 2 a.m. And it would. "That nice young man in 3C is going to have a fall. Don't worry, he'll just be bruised." And he did, and he was. The staff just wrote it off as the ramblings of a confused old woman who occasionally got lucky. But I was with her every night. It wasn't luck. It felt like she was watching a rerun of a show she'd seen 1,000 times. I grew fond of her, but the fondness was tangled with a deep, creeping dread. The line between her mind and the world felt permeable. The real terror began when her memories started to include me. I was thinking about quitting. I'd been saving up to go back to art school, and I was just about there. I hadn't told a soul. It was just a plan in my own head. One night, I was sitting with Adelaide while she watched an old black and white movie. She turned to me during a commercial, her eyes strangely lucid. "I remember you telling me you were a wonderful painter," she said softly. "It's a shame you were thinking of leaving us, but I'm glad you decided to stay." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It was a profound violation. My own private thoughts, my own plans, reflected back at me as a memory of a conversation that had never happened. I started to dread my shifts. I felt exposed, like my skull was made of glass. I found one of her old journals once, tucked under her mattress. It was filled with the same entry, written over and over. "Today is Tuesday, the sun is out. The nurse will bring me my pills at 9. He is a kind boy." But each entry had tiny variations, as if she were trying to find a different path through the same day. In one, the nurse was a nice boy. In another, he spilled the water. It was like she was documenting every possible timeline. The breaking point, the thing that made me leave and never look back, was the hum. Since I was a child, I've had a recurring nightmare. In it, I'm in a long, dark hallway and there's a sound. A simple, off-key humming melody. It's not a real song. It's just a sound my own subconscious cooked up to terrify me. It's the sound of pure dread. One night around 4 a.m., the facility was dead quiet. I was doing my final rounds. I looked into Adelaide's room and saw she was sitting bolt upright in her bed, staring at the far wall. I stepped inside, about to ask if she needed anything. She slowly turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, looking right through me. And then she began to hum. It was the melody from my nightmare. Note for perfect, horrifying note. I didn't even clock out. I walked out the front door, got in my car, and drove until the sun came up. I never went back. I still think about her. The doctors said she was stuck in a loop of her own memories. But what if they were wrong? What if she was an antenna, and her mind was just a receiver, picking up the past, the future, and the nightmares of everyone around her? Sometimes, when I'm just about to fall asleep, I can still hear it. That quiet, off-key hum. And I wonder if she wasn't stuck in a loop of her life, but a loop of all of ours. I used to have friends. I used to go to parties. I used to be able to sit across from someone, a date or a friend, and just listen. I used to be able to laugh at a joke I hadn't heard before. That's all gone now. My life is a movie I've already seen, a book I've already read, and I am the only one who knows how it ends. It all changed because of a guy named Dave and a couch at a house party. It started small about 10 years ago. Little flickers. I'd be talking with my best friend, Greg, and I'd know, with absolute certainty, the punchline to a story he was just starting to tell. The first few times, I'd blurt it out and we'd laugh. "Get out of my head, man," he'd say, punching my arm. It was a fun quirk, a weird kind of synchronicity between us. It felt like a superpower, a cool party trick. I remember once at a bar, I predicted the next 3 songs the jukebox would play. My friends were amazed, buying me drinks, calling me a psychic. For a little while, it was fun. I felt special. The novelty started to wear off when the predictions became less like fun facts and more like intrusions. The gift grew stronger, more detailed, and it was no longer voluntary. It was like a radio in my head that I couldn't turn off, broadcasting the next few seconds of reality on a constant loop. The night it all curdled, the night I realized it was a curse, was at a friend's house party. It was your typical weekend get-together with cheap beer, music that was a little too loud, and conversations you'd forget by morning. I was in the living room, talking to Greg, trying to have a normal conversation, trying to ignore the constant stream of predictions that made every interaction feel rehearsed. I saw this guy, Dave, someone I barely knew from a college class, get up from a chair and start walking toward the kitchen. As he walked, it hit me. Not a flicker this time, but a full-blown scene, downloaded directly into my brain with ice-cold clarity. It was a complete narrative, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. I turned to Greg, my own voice sounding distant to my ears. "Watch this," I said. "Dave's going to stop right before he gets to the kitchen. He's hungry, but he's going to forget what he was doing. He'll just stand there for a second. Then he's going to turn around, stumble, and pass out behind the couch." Greg gave me a weird look, a mix of amusement and annoyance. "Dude, everyone knows Dave's gonna pass out eventually. He's been chugging vodka like it's water." "No," I insisted, my voice tight. "Not just pass out. He's going to fall there. In that specific spot." We watched, and it happened exactly as I said. Dave stopped dead in his tracks, a profoundly confused look on his face. He stood there for a moment swaying, as if his brain had been wiped clean. Then he turned, his legs tangled, and he stumbled over his own feet, collapsing in a heap in the narrow, dusty space between the back of the couch and the wall. Greg wasn't laughing anymore. He stared from Dave's unconscious form to me, his face pale in the dim party lights. The amusement was gone, replaced by a deep, unsettling fear. "How did you know that?" he whispered. "How did you know he'd fall there?" He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Come on, man. We're leaving." He barely spoke to me after that night. The look in his eyes had changed. I wasn't his friend anymore. I was something else. Something unnatural. That was the beginning of the end. My social life began to decay. I couldn't have a normal conversation because I'd know what the other person was going to say before they said it. I'd finish their sentences. Not in a cute, or so in sync kind of way. In a creepy, get out of my head kind of way that made people flinch. Dates would end with nervous smiles and promises to call that never came. I remember one woman, a kind art student named Chloe, who just stopped talking mid-sentence and stared at me. "It's like you're not even listening," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's like you're just waiting for me to say my lines." She was right. Friends started avoiding me. Phone calls became strained. They said I made them uncomfortable. That talking to me felt like I was reading their mind. I tried to suppress it, to act surprised, to pretend I didn't know the punchline to their joke before they even started telling it. But it was exhausting. It was like being the only person in the world who'd already seen the movie everyone else was watching for the first time. The joy, the spontaneity, the simple act of shared discovery was gone. The final straw came at a dinner party. It was my last-ditch effort to reconnect with what was left of my friend group. The hosts were a married couple, Sarah and Tom, people I had known for years. I went there determined to be normal, to bite my tongue, to just exist in the moment. For the first hour, it almost worked. We were talking about work, about movies, about nothing. Then, as they were serving dinner, I looked at them, standing side by side in their beautiful dining room, and it hit me. The biggest, Most detailed vision I had ever had. A flash forward. A whole scene playing out in my head with perfect, horrifying fidelity. I saw them, later that night, in that same dining room, having a vicious, soul-destroying fight. I heard the words they would use. Words about money, about a secret credit card, about Tom's gambling problem. I saw the wine glass Tom would throw against the wall, the dark red liquid splashing like blood against the pale paint. I knew the specific, cruel insult about Sarah's mother that would make her break down in tears. A sound of pure heartbreak. I spent the rest of the dinner in a cold sweat, my food tasteless in my mouth. I felt like I was sitting on a bomb. I tried to steer the conversation to safe, boring topics. I complimented the food so much I sounded insane. Every time Tom poured Sarah another glass of wine, my stomach twisted into a knot. They just looked at me like I was crazy, my behavior getting more and more erratic as I tried to diffuse a future only I could see. My desperate attempts to be cheerful only seemed to put them on edge. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. The air was too thick with the future. I mumbled an excuse about not feeling well and practically ran out of their house, leaving a wake of confused silence behind me. As I was walking down their driveway, my hands shaking so badly I could barely find my keys, I heard the shouting start. It was followed by the sharp, distinct shatter of glass. I never spoke to any of them again. Now, I'm alone. Not because I want to be, but because I have to be. The worst part isn't seeing the future. It's being completely out of sync with the present. It's the crushing loneliness of being an audience member to a play that everyone else believes is real life. I would give anything, absolutely anything, to be surprised again. I'd give anything to not know what you're going to say next. When Liam and I first realized it was happening, we thought it was funny. A quirk. Our own private, weird little glitch in the universe. We'd been together for 4 years, living in a small, sun-drenched apartment that was more ours than any place I'd ever known. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our comfortable, worn-in love. The argument was just another one of those things, at first. It started, as most stupid arguments do, over something insignificant, dishes left in the sink. The first time, it was a normal fight. I'd had a long day at work, and I came home to find the breakfast dishes still sitting there, a film of dried egg yolk on the plates. Liam was on the couch, lost in a video game. I made a passive-aggressive comment. He responded with a defensive one. Tones escalated, sighs were weaponized, and the whole petty, familiar dance of domestic friction played out. It ended with me saying, with theatrical frustration, "Fine, I'll do them," and storming off to the bedroom to slam the door. Standard stuff. Forgotten an hour later. A few weeks later, it happened again. I walked in, saw the dishes, and felt a strange flicker of familiarity as Liam said from the couch, "You know, I was just thinking." The conversation that followed was identical. Not just similar, identical. The same words, in the same order, with the same inflections. The same gestures, the same rising frustration. It was like watching a scene from a movie we'd both forgotten we'd seen. It ended, precisely as before, with me saying, "Fine, I'll do them," and storming off. When I came back out a few minutes later, the anger already dissipating, he was looking at me, a strange, amused grin on his face. "Deja vu?" he asked. We laughed about it for days. It was our thing. But the third time it happened, we weren't laughing. The moment he said, "You know, I was just thinking," a cold dread washed over both of us. We looked at each other across the living room, our eyes wide with a kind of shared horror. We knew the lines we were about to speak. We tried to stop it. I remember my brain screaming, "Say something else.
Ask him about his day.
Tell him you love him." I tried to say, "Let's order a pizza," but the words that came out of my mouth, feeling alien and sharp on my own tongue, were, "Is it really that hard to just rinse a plate?" It felt like we were possessed, like we were puppets on invisible strings, forced to act out a script written by some cruel, invisible playwright. The argument would play out word for word, and we were powerless to stop it. The worst part was that the emotions felt real. The anger, the resentment, the frustration, we were forced to feel it all, over and over again, even as a part of our minds watched from a distance, horrified. The argument was a virus. and it was slowly infecting our actual relationship, leaving real wounds long after the loop had ended. The things we said in that loop, we'd remember them later, and the sting was real, even if the intent wasn't ours. We became terrified of the trigger phrase. Life in the apartment became a minefield of conversational avoidance. We stopped talking in the kitchen after dinner. We'd fill the evening silence with loud music or the TV, anything to avoid an empty space where the phrase might creep in. We communicated in fragments, in safe, pre-approved sentences. The easy, comfortable silence we used to share became a tense, watchful quiet. The love was still there, but it was hiding, scared to come out. We tried to fight it. We tried to break the loop with logic. One evening, sensing the atmospheric pressure changing, Liam grabbed my hand and pulled me out the door. "Let's go for a walk," he said, his voice tight. We walked for miles, ending up in a park we'd never been to before. We sat on a bench under a street lamp, the city humming around us. It was safe. It was different. Then he turned to me, a relieved smile on his face, and said, "You know, I was just thinking." And there, on that park bench, under the light of a strange moon, we had the same fight about the dishes that were miles away in our sink. The script didn't care about location. Another time we tried writing. We passed a notepad back and forth, a silent, desperate conversation. For an hour it worked. Then, my hand, holding the pen, seemed to move on its own. I watched, my blood turning to ice, as I wrote, "Is it really that hard to just rinse a plate?" He snatched the pad, his face ashen, and wrote back the next line. We were trapped. The breaking point came on a rainy Sunday afternoon. The apartment felt small and suffocating. We decided we had to prove we weren't crazy. We were going to beat it. We sat down at the dining room table, a pen and a notebook between us. The plan was to document the madness, to write down the script as it happened. If we could see it, objectify it, maybe we could control it. He looked at me, his face grim. He took a deep breath, and it began. "You know, I was just thinking." As the hateful, familiar words started spilling out of our mouths, our hands started to write them down. I watched, horrified, as my own hand scribbled insults I didn't want to say, my handwriting a perfect, steady script of a person I didn't recognize. I tried to make it right. "I love you." I screamed it in my head, a desperate, silent rebellion. But my hand wrote, "You're so lazy." I don't know why I put up with it. We were prisoners in our own bodies, forced to create a perfect, tangible record of our own destruction. The argument ended, as it always did, with the final cutting remark, with the sound of a chair scraping back, with the slam of the front door as one of us left. He never came back. I'm alone now, in this quiet house that hums with his absence. I still have the notebook. The script of our destruction, written in our own handwriting, sits on the dining room table. I can't bring myself to throw it away. It's the only proof I have that what we had was real, and that the thing that took it away was real too. I read it sometimes and I wonder, did the loop create the resentment that broke us? Or was the loop just a symptom, a supernatural manifestation of a rot that was already there, deep down inside our relationship, a crack in the foundation that it could exploit? I don't know if our love was ever real, or if it was just a prelude to the same, inevitable argument. I don't know if we ever had a choice. All I know is that sometimes, when I'm washing a dish in the silent kitchen, I hear a floorboard creak behind me, and for a terrifying second, I expect to hear him say, "You know, I was just thinking." For most of my life, I've been an optimist. I believe in signs. I believe that the universe nudges you in the right direction, that you end up where you're meant to be. A single dream I had years ago was all the proof I needed. Now, the memory of that same dream is the reason I wake up screaming. The dream itself was simple, mundane even, and I had it when I was 19, drifting between a community college course I hated and a part-time job at a coffee shop. In the dream, I was working in a big, industrial-looking room. It was loud, with the constant, heavy hum of machinery. I was standing at a cold, steel table, wearing thick, ill-fitting gloves and cutting a mountain of oranges in half. I remember the sharp, sweet smell, so strong it was almost overpowering, and the sticky juice running over my gloves, making them feel heavy. I turned to a coworker, A man whose face I couldn't see, just a blur in my dream vision. And I said, "I never realized how sticky oranges made you." That was it. I woke up, thought it was weirdly specific, and then, like most dreams, it faded into the background noise of my life. Life went on. I dropped out of the college course. I quit the coffee shop. I worked a series of dead-end jobs in a call center where I listened to people yell at me for 8 hours a day, in a retail stockroom folding shirts that would be unfolded seconds later, as a delivery driver getting lost in suburbs I never knew existed. I always felt a little lost, like I was waiting for a signal, for some clear sign that I was on the right track. Then, after years of drifting, I saw a job posting for a local company that made cold-pressed juices. It paid well. The people seemed nice during the interview, and I loved the smell of fresh fruit that hung in the air. I got the job. I mostly worked in the storefront, taking orders and making smoothies. I was happy. The work was simple, the customers were friendly, and my boss was one of the coolest people I'd ever met. I felt like I'd finally found my place. On busy days, they'd have me help out with production in the back. The back room was a big, industrial space filled with the hum of machinery. One afternoon, they had a massive order for orange juice, and they put me on cutting duty. I stood at a steel table, put on a pair of thick gloves, and started slicing through a crate of oranges. The sharp, sweet smell filled the air. My gloves got stickier and stickier. And then it hit me, a wave of déjà vu so powerful it almost knocked me over. It was the dream. This was the room. This was the moment. I looked up at my coworker, a friendly guy named Ben who was working at the station next to me. Without even thinking, the words came out of my mouth. "I never realized how sticky oranges made you." Ben chuckled, a good-natured sound that was almost lost in the noise of the room. But I was frozen. A huge, goofy smile spread across my face. It was the sign. After all these years of feeling adrift, the universe was telling me, clear as day, you are in the right place. You are exactly where you are meant to be. I felt a profound sense of peace and contentment wash over me, a warmth that spread through my entire body. This was it, the confirmation I had been waiting for my entire adult life. And then I heard a sound, a rattling, metallic clicking noise from the industrial slicer next to Ben's station. A harsh, ugly sound that was wrong, that didn't belong in the steady rhythm of the room. The sound was a key. It unlocked the rest of the dream, the part my brain had buried for years. The memory didn't just come back, it exploded behind my eyes in a torrent of ice-cold horror. In the dream, right after I said the line about the oranges, I heard that same rattle. I looked over at my faceless coworker. I saw him turn toward the rattling machine to clear a jam. I saw him reach his hand inside, and I saw the blade guard, the one that was supposed to drop down, fail. The flash of red in my dream, it wasn't orange juice. My smile vanished. The feeling of peace was replaced by a terror so absolute it rooted me to the spot. I looked up from my own memory, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Ben was turning toward the rattling machine. He sighed, shaking his head. Damn thing's jammed again. He started to reach for it. I have to say something. I have to scream. I have to tackle him. My mind is a siren, wailing a frantic, silent alarm, but my body is locked in place, a spectator to a horror I've already witnessed. The memory of the dream is more powerful than my own will. It tells me there is nothing I can do to change this. It has already happened. And as Ben's hand moves closer to the chattering blades, I finally understand the true terror of seeing the future. It's not about knowing what will happen. It's about knowing you're powerless to stop it.